Families are supposed to be safe havens, the people who catch you when the world tries to break you. But sometimes, the deepest wounds don't come from outsiders. They come from the ones you share blood with. My name is Adanna, and this is the story of how my sister, the girl who once held my hand when I crossed busy streets, the one who shared secrets with me under mosquito nets on hot nights, turned into someone I could barely recognize. She didn't just betray me. She crushed me under the weight of greed, envy, and something far colder. When she raised my rent from $1,450 to $4,100 overnight, I thought it was a mistake. When she smirked, I thought maybe she was joking. But when our parents called it fair, I realized I was living in a nightmare I could not wake up from. And that was only the beginning. I grew up in Enugu, Nigeria, in a modest but respectable family. My father was a civil engineer, my mother a schoolteacher. My sister, Chiamaka, was 4 years older than me. Everyone used to say she was the beauty of the family, tall, with flawless skin, the kind of girl who seemed born to shine. I, on the other hand, was always described as the quiet one, bookish and serious, with ambitions that reached beyond the dusty streets of our hometown. Despite our differences, Chiamaka and I were close growing up. She teased me, sure, but she also defended me when others tried to. I thought we were a team. But as we grew older, our paths diverged. I studied accounting at the University of Lagos, graduated top of my class, and landed a good job at a multinational firm. Chiamaka, meanwhile, tried her hand at modeling, then fashion, then event planning. Each venture ended the same way, half-finished, abandoned when the money or attention dried up. Still, my parents doted on her, covering her failures with soft words and endless financial support. "Chiamaka just hasn't found her path yet," my mother would say. "She'll get there. She has potential," my father added. I never complained, though sometimes resentment bubbled in my chest. I believed my parents loved us equally. I believed my hard work would eventually be noticed too. Years later, when I decided to rent an apartment in Lekki to be closer to work, it was Chiamaka who approached me with an offer. "Why waste money with strangers? I bought a duplex here last year," she said proudly, her eyes glinting. "You can rent one of the flats from me. Family discount, of course." At the time, it seemed like a blessing. Rent in Lekki was expensive, and though $1,450 a month was a stretch, it was manageable given my salary. Besides, renting from my sister gave me peace of mind. Who could I trust more than family? For the first year, everything went smoothly. I paid my rent on time. She sometimes even stopped by to check in. But by the second year, small cracks began to show. She'd ask casually, "Adanna, how much do you make again? You're earning big money now, right?" Or she'd make remarks like, "You're living better than me, and I'm the landlord." I brushed these off, not realizing they were signs of something darker brewing. The day everything collapsed began like any other. It was a humid Saturday morning, and I was sitting on my balcony with a cup of tea when Chiamaka showed up unannounced. She was dressed in designer clothes, carrying a handbag that looked more expensive than my monthly salary. "Adanna," she began sweetly, "we need to review your rent contract." My heart skipped. "Why? I've been paying regularly." She smiled, but it wasn't warm. It was the kind of smile you give before delivering bad news you secretly enjoy. "Things have changed. The market rate in this area is higher now. I've decided your rent will be $4,100 starting next month." At first, I laughed. "Chiamaka, be serious. That's impossible. You know I can't afford that." But her eyes stayed cold. "I am serious. If you can't pay, I'll have to rent it out to someone who can. It's just business." "Business? I'm your sister?" I shouted, my voice trembling. She leaned closer, her perfume thick and cloying, and whispered, "Sister, yes. But tenant first." I felt like the ground had disappeared beneath me. Desperate, I called my parents. Surely, they would intervene. Surely, they would see how unfair this was. We gathered at their house the following Sunday. I laid everything bare: the sudden rent hike, the impossible figure, the threat of eviction. My voice cracked as I begged them to understand. But what I heard in response broke me more than Chiamaka's betrayal ever could. My father folded his arms. "Adanna, your sister is right. Property in Lekki is expensive. She's actually giving you a good rate." My mother nodded firmly. "Yes. You've been fortunate to pay so little for so long. It's only fair she adjusts it." Fair. That word echoed in my skull like a curse. I stared at them, tears blurring my vision. "How is it fair to destroy your own sister's life? How is it fair to demand something she knows I can't pay?" Chiamaka sat smugly beside them, lips curved in that same smirk I now hated. She didn't even need to defend herself. My parents were doing it for her. In that moment, I realized something I had ignored for years. My parents had always favored her. My achievements, my sacrifices, my independence, none of it mattered. Chiamaka could do no wrong in their eyes. And now, they were helping her ruin me. The weeks that followed were some of the darkest in my life. I tried to reason with Chiamaka, but every conversation ended with her repeating the same line. "It's just business." I tried to find another place, but moving costs and deposits in Lagos were crushing. My savings weren't enough. At work, I could barely focus. I made mistakes I never would have before. Colleagues whispered that I looked pale, drained. They didn't know I cried myself to sleep every night, haunted by my sister's smirk and my parents' cold indifference. Every corner of my apartment, once a sanctuary, now felt like a trap closing in. The walls seemed to echo Chiamaka's words. The silence carried the weight of betrayal. I started to wonder, maybe they wanted me to fail. Maybe they wanted me to crawl, to break, so Chiamaka could always be the star, the favored child, while I became nothing. And then, something inside me shifted. One night, sitting alone in the dark, I realized I had two choices: surrender to their cruelty or fight for my own survival. But to fight, I would need to become someone else. Someone colder. Someone who could play their game and win. I took a deep breath, wiped my tears, and whispered to myself, "This story is not ending here. Not like this." That was the night my heart hardened. That was the night I decided I would no longer be the quiet one, the overlooked one, the one everyone thought they could crush. If my sister thought she could bury me under her greed, she was wrong. If my parents thought I would bend to their favoritism, they had underestimated me. Because from that moment on, I wasn't just Adanna the daughter, or Adanna the sister. I was Adanna, the woman who would take back her power, no matter the cost. And what came next would shock even me. The first step was silence. I stopped arguing with Chiamaka. I stopped pleading with my parents. On the surface, it looked like I had accepted defeat, like I was preparing to pack my bags and crawl away. Chiamaka, of course, loved this. Every time we crossed paths, she gave me that smug little grin, as though victory was already hers. But inside, I was studying, watching, waiting. I began to take note of her lifestyle. The expensive handbags, the flashy wigs, the designer heels she wore even to church. Her constant Instagram posts of soft life, dinners at high-end restaurants. To the outside world, she was glowing. But I knew enough about money to recognize a trap. She was living beyond her means. One evening, after work, I bumped into a friend of hers at a bar. She was tipsy, loose-tongued, and didn't even realize the gems she was dropping. "Chiamaka is too brave," she laughed. Always borrowing from this one and that one. Bank loans SEF. If she doesn't pay back soon and wallet go burst. My heart skipped. So that was it. She wasn't rich. She wasn't even stable. She was drowning, and my rent, tripled, strangled, impossible, was just another way to drag money into her sinking ship. That night, I felt the first spark of power return to me. Instead of panicking, I shifted my energy. At work, I poured myself into overtime. Every naira I earned, I saved. I cut down on outings, ate cheap meals, and lived like a shadow. Chiamaka thought she was cornering me, but in reality, I was preparing for something bigger. At the same time, I began documenting everything: copies of our rent agreement, bank transfers, even text messages where she admitted to raising my rent. I wasn't sure yet how I would use them, but I knew I needed evidence. The breaking point came one Sunday afternoon at our parents' house. We were seated at the dining table, the air thick with the smell of jollof rice and fried plantain, when my father casually asked, "So, Adanna, have you accepted the new rent terms?" I clenched my jaw. Chiamaka sat across from me, swirling her glass of wine with that mocking smirk. "Yes, Daddy," I said evenly. "I'm working on it. But before I pay, I'll need a proper signed lease reflecting the new terms. After all, business is business, right?" For the first time, Chiamaka's smile faltered. She hadn't expected that. My father nodded approvingly, thinking I was finally mature. My mother smiled, pleased that the sisters were handling things properly. But inside, I was already 10 steps ahead. That week, I visited a lawyer friend from university. I explained everything, laid out the documents, the transfers, the sudden rent hike. He frowned, shaking his head. "Adanna, she can't just do this without legal procedure. In fact, if you push this, she'll be the one in trouble. You have rights as a tenant, even if she's your sister." My chest tightened with relief. For the first time, I felt the law standing beside me like an ally. When I left his office that evening, the city lights of Lagos seemed brighter. The cars honking on Ozumbambadu sounded less like chaos and more like music. I wasn't defeated. I wasn't powerless. Chiamaka thought she had trapped me. But she had forgotten one thing. I was not just her younger sister. I was an accountant. I was meticulous. And I was about to show her that greed has a price. As I walked into my apartment that night, I no longer saw a cage. I saw a battlefield. And on this battlefield, I had more than pain and betrayal on my side. I had knowledge. I had evidence. And soon, I would have justice. But I also knew one thing. In my family, justice never came clean. It always came with blood, tears, and scars that never healed. The day of confrontation came faster than I expected. Chiamaka sent me a curt message. "Your rent is due. No payment by Friday, I'll change the locks. Business is business." Something inside me snapped. For months, I had lived in fear of eviction, of my parents' cold judgment, of being swallowed by debt. But now, holding the lawyer's advice and my collected evidence, I felt calm. When Friday arrived, instead of transferring money, I called for a family meeting. We gathered once again in the familiar living room of my parents' house. The same walls that had witnessed my childhood laughter now closed in on me like a courtroom. Chiamaka sat with her arms crossed, my parents flanking her like loyal soldiers. "So?" she demanded. "Did you bring the rent?" I placed a folder on the table. Slowly, deliberately, I slid the documents across. "No. What I brought," I said, my voice steady, "is proof that what you're doing is illegal." They stared at me. My father frowned. "Illegal? How?" I leaned forward, my hands trembling slightly but my words sharp as a blade. She raised my rent without proper notice. She threatened eviction without due process. And here, I tap the papers, are all the transactions, the messages, everything. If she wants to treat me as just a tenant, then I'll treat her as just a landlord. And the law does not stand on her side. For a moment, silence filled the room. My parents exchanged nervous glances. Chiamaka's smirk disappeared entirely, replaced by a flicker of panic. "You wouldn't dare," she hissed. "Try me," I whispered. The room turned chaotic. My mother scolded me for airing family matters like strangers. My father tried to downplay it, urging me to be reasonable. But for once, I didn't fold. "You all call this fair?" I asked, my voice cracking. "You watched her crush me. You took her side while she mocked me. You called it fair because it was easy. But fairness isn't about blood. It's about truth. And if the truth has to come from a courtroom instead of this family, so be it." Chiamaka slammed her fist on the table. "You've always been jealous. Always trying to prove you're better. Now you want to drag me down because I'm living better than you?" I laughed bitterly. "Better? You're drowning in debts, Chiamaka." "I know. Everyone knows. That's why you needed to choke me with rent. Not because of the market, but because of your greed." Her face twisted. For the first time, the mask cracked, and beneath it, I saw not power but desperation. In the end, my parents didn't admit they were wrong. They never do. But they begged me not to involve the law. My father muttered promises to talk to Chiamaka. My mother pleaded for peace in the family. And me? I stood up, gathered my folder, and walked out. That night I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I sat in my apartment, my temporary battlefield, and realized something profound. Sometimes, the family you are born into is not the family that protects you. Sometimes, blood ties are chains, and the only way to breathe is to break them. I eventually moved out, not because Chiamaka forced me to, but because I chose to reclaim my freedom. I found a smaller, cheaper place, not as glamorous but mine. Mine in peace, mine in dignity. Chiamaka still posts her lavish dinners online. My parents still praise her loudly while staying silent about me. But I no longer crave their validation. Because in the end, I learned that fairness isn't given. It's taken. And though I lost a home, I gained something far more valuable: clarity. The clarity that sometimes survival means letting go of family who smile while they bleed you dry.